From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force. This citation is from chapter 11, verse 12 of Matthew's Gospel. Given the darkness of brutal violence in Israel and Palestine over the last week, the words from Matthew seem so real, so credible, so hauntingly accurate. Fergal Keane, in his book, The Madness, a memoir of war, fear and PTSD, quotes from Susan Sontag's essay regarding the pain of others, where she writes of those star witnesses renowned for their bravery and zeal, but whose reports nourish belief in the inevitability of tragedy in the benighted or backward, that is, poor parts of the world. Fergal Keane initially flinched at Sontag's words, but then thought of how in his role as a journalist, how dependent he is on imagery for storytelling power. Pictures of machetes and clubs and mounds of bodies from the Rwandan genocide crisis in 1994, which Keane reported on, inevitably had the effect described by Susan Sontag. Keane shares, the dead were not only stripped of their humanity by the killers, reduced to bones and rotting flesh, they were trapped by journalists' images. The cameras could not record the lives the dead had lived. Today's wedding feast parable from Jesus tells of a king who would fill his banquet hall for a joyful occasion by using lethal force and terror. He doesn't just kill the first invitees who turned him down. No, he makes a big show of it by also destroying their city. Theologian Marty Aitken, in seeking to understand the wedding feast banquet parable by researching diligently third-party historical sources such as Josephus, shows how the various historical King Herods actually behaved in ways very similar to the king in the parable. Aitken argues strongly that the king in the parable story would have certainly sparked in Jesus' audience thoughts of kings much closer to their situation in history, namely the Herods, especially the first King Herod. In this parable, Jesus is clearly giving an example of the worst kind of brutal dictators, the type of dictators who have littered human history with victims. Fergal Keane, reflecting further on his experience in Rwanda, writes, in the years after the genocide, I believed that the apocalypse that descended on Rwanda was something that could ultimately only be understood through recourse to philosophers and moral theologians. I looked to God for answers and to blame. This was mistaken. Evil is not mysterious. What we call inhuman in the case of Rwanda, the recourse to mass murder of a perceived enemy using methods calculated to terrorize, is intrinsically human. The Canadian writer and politician Michael Ignatieff freed Fergal Keane from any metaphysical explanations about the human condition. Ignatieff writing about genocide in Rwanda, argues this exterminatory impulse is much misunderstood. It is actually a kind of longing for utopia, a blood sacrifice in the worship of an idea of paradise. What could be more like paradise on earth than to live in a community without enemies? To create a world with no more borders or watch posts, a world freed from fear in the night and war by day, a world safe from the deadly contaminations and temptations of other tribes. What could be more beautiful than to live in a community with people who resemble each other in every particular? We all long for harmony, for an end to the seemingly interminable discord of human relations. What could be more seductive than to kill in order to put an end to all killings? Theologian James Allison argues that Jesus took the language, images, and hope of the Jewish apocalyptic imagination, but subverted them from within to be reconstructed around a God who suffers our violence as the way of redeeming the world from violence. Violence always begets violence. Retaliatory actions that seal ordinary families off from food, fuel, and other supplies always deepens resentments. The guest in the parable without a wedding garment has done no wrong, but symbolizes the suffering Christ who hurls a message of peace. Our prayer is not for utopia or paradise, but that wise peace envoys will emerge to invite Israelis and Palestinians to tables where diversity and difference are cherished and fostered, so that violence may end. Amen.